It's a freezing night, 20,000 years ago, and you're lying on the cold ground with nothing but a thin hide between you and the frost. Then something moves in the dark. 4 legs, warm breath, teeth that could tear your throat out in half a second. And you don't run. You let it lie down next to you. This is the story of how humans ended up sharing their beds, their fires, and eventually their entire lives with animals that used to be trying to eat them. And the wild part is, it probably wasn't our idea. Let's start with the obvious question: which animal, and when? The answer is the wolf, and the honest timeline is messier than you'd expect. Genetic studies put the split between dogs and wild wolves somewhere between 40,000 and 15,000 years ago. A range wide enough to be almost useless, except for one thing every study agrees on. It happened during the Ice Age, in brutally cold conditions, among small bands of hunter-gatherers, who had absolutely no concept of pet. The oldest undisputed dog remains come from a site in Germany called Bonn Oberkassel, a puppy buried around 14,200 years ago, deliberately placed in a grave alongside 2 humans. Not eaten, not discarded, buried, with grave goods, like it mattered. Here's the theory nobody expects, and it's the one most researchers now take seriously. Humans probably didn't domesticate wolves on purpose. The wolves may have domesticated themselves. Picture an Ice Age hunting camp. Humans kill large game, and inevitably, there's waste. Bones, scraps, carcasses, too picked over to bother with. That waste is a calorie source just sitting there, and wolves are opportunists. Most wolves would have kept their distance, too wired for fight or flight to risk it. But some wolves, through pure genetic variation, were born slightly less reactive, slightly calmer around strange smells, and upright spear-carrying primates. Those wolves could scavenge the edges of a human camp without bolting, which meant they ate more, survived winters better, and had more pups. Generation after generation, camp-tolerant wolves outbred their jumpier cousins, not because a single human ever tried to tame one, but because being relaxed around people was, quietly, a survival advantage. Natural selection wasn't selecting for size or speed anymore. It was selecting for chill. There's real experimental proof this kind of self-selection actually works, and it comes from an experiment that's honestly one of the strangest in the history of biology. Starting in 1959, Soviet scientist Dmitry Belyaev began breeding silver foxes, selecting each generation purely for one trait: calmness around humans. Nothing else. Not appearance, not size. Just tameness. Within a few generations, something bizarre started happening. The foxes didn't just get friendlier. Their ears started flopping, their tails curled, their coats developed white patches. Some kept juvenile puppy-like facial features into adulthood. Nobody bred for any of that. It came along for free, a side effect biologists now call domestication syndrome, and it strongly suggests that whatever process shaped early dogs from wolves may have run largely on autopilot, driven by tameness alone, reshaping bodies as a byproduct. So the wolves showed up on their own. But why let them stay close enough to sleep next to you? Warmth is the simplest answer, and it's not speculation, it's documented behavior. In multiple cold climate cultures, from indigenous Australians to Arctic peoples, there's a recorded practice of using dogs as literal living blankets, curling up against their body heat on freezing nights. There's even a phrase for it that survived into modern English: a 3-dog night, meaning a night so cold you needed 3 dogs pressed against you just to survive until morning. On an open plain in an Ice Age winter, an animal that generates its own heat and doesn't mind being hugged is not a companion, it's survival equipment. But warmth alone doesn't explain the depth of the relationship, because dogs offered something humans couldn't replicate with a fire or an extra hide: senses. A sleeping human is nearly defenseless, deaf to the sounds outside a shelter, blind in the dark, unaware of a predator or a rival group closing in. A dog's hearing and sense of smell are dramatically sharper than a human's. A wolf-descended animal sleeping at the edge of camp would wake, growl, or bolt upright at a threat, long before any human noticed a thing. Humans got no early warning system. Dogs got food, warmth, and protection from larger predators, who wouldn't risk a fight near an armed group. It wasn't friendship at first. It was a trade, brutal and pragmatic, that happened to feel like something more. And here's where it gets genuinely strange, because that trade seems to have rewired something in both species. Dogs are the only known animal that reliably reads human pointing gestures, something even chimpanzees, our closest relatives, mostly fail to do. Dogs also lock eyes with humans in prolonged mutual gaze. And when they do, both species release oxytocin, the same bonding hormone that spikes between a mother and her infant. Wolves raised by humans from birth do not do this. It's not learned. It's something that changed in the dog genome itself over thousands of years. A species that essentially evolved to look into human eyes and trigger the exact chemical response a parent feels toward a child. No other domesticated animal does this. Not horses, not cattle, not cats. Cats, in fact, tell almost the opposite story. They arrived thousands of years later, around 10,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent, drawn not to hunting camps, but to grain stores, hunting the rodents that grain attracted. Humans didn't select cats for tameness the way wolves were shaped. Cats just showed up, ate the mice, and never fully surrendered their independence, which is, if you think about it, still true of every cat that has ever ignored you while you called its name. So when you think about that freezing night 20,000 years ago, the human lying still while something with teeth lay down beside them, understand what actually happened there. It wasn't a decision made in a single moment. It was thousands of years of accidental selection, cold nights, shared scraps, and animals that slowly, generation by generation, evolved to want to be near you as much as you wanted them near you. Humans didn't tame the wolf. Something in the wolf decided we were worth staying close to, and something in us decided to let it.